I'll introduce you very quickly to our two speakers today, one of them an alumni, that is Kelvin Tran, and also his collaborator these days, who is his boss actually, Stuart Bourne, who's founder and director of Mosaic and CEO of Mosaic Housing. Stuart is both an attorney and a developer with significant experience in the deployment of precursors to industrialized housing technology, and that's really what he's here to speak about today. Developed over 1 million square feet of real estate and spent years creating software solutions that incorporate European manufacturing technologies into the domestic US construction industry. So we're very, very happy to have these two. And like I said, we really want to focus our attention through this series on the future of the industry and all kinds of innovations and how people are doing this business these days. And I don't think we could have anyone better than Stuart to speak with us today, and our own alumni, Kelvin, who's jumped in with both feet to be in part of this industry as well. So thank you all for coming, and I'm going to let Stuart and Kelvin take it away.
Okay, hi, this is Stuart Bourne. I founded Mosaic Housing. The germination of this idea happened when I was building a workforce housing subdivision up in Eagle, Colorado, and used some US modular product in the development. And then I became a dealer for that particular modular housing company. And I went and I saw their plant, and they were just building it like we build outside, inside, what we call Western platform framing. And I immediately set on a course to figure out how to automate these kinds of systems. Turns out the Europeans were already doing it. And just to so you can understand where we were to how this became a possibility. The Europeans, at the time, it was illegal to build with wood frame housing, residential housing. And because there was an agreement between the masonry guilds in Europe and the government not to allow any other kind of housing other than masonry. And 2 or 3 Europeans came over to California to go to college, and they were framing on job sites to pay their way through college. And they brought the technology of wood frame residential housing back to Europe. They went to Europe, and they went to a European, German pallet maker and asked them if they could take the machinery and adjust it to create frame walls. So that's what happened. And the marketplace in Europe went from, in the 1960s, from 0% wood frame housing to now where, depending on the country, it's 20 to 30% of the overall. So that's, I think that's pretty amazing. And virtually all of that housing is partially or completely built in a factory. So I've been a developer for some time, and my experience in the Bluffs, in the project I did in Eagle, made it such that I wanted to work on workforce housing and find a way to make it financially viable. One of the problems is, since the crash in 2008, we've lost 4 million construction workers. 2 million that we can count, and 2 million that we can't count for obvious reasons. And so The problem is when we did a focus group, the developers were saying, the building I built last year is 20% more expensive this year just because of labor issues. So that's why we started this process. I spent 6 months in Europe in their factories, understanding their systems and changing them to work better for the overall marketplace and better for the US marketplace. So let's go to the next slide. Go to 2.
This one?
Yeah, here on.
Yeah, and then I mean the amount of shortage that we have for affordable and workforce housing is just outstanding. With some of the data that we've seen from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, Colorado alone, you just can't build enough and cheap enough for a lot of the renters below kind of 80% AMI. So it's a really severe kind of issue that we're facing here. There's a lot of product that's going up, but not enough product to the right demographic.
So just to show you in practice how what we can accomplish with our system is that we can build, we're actually doing a joint venture with Hunt Capital, the Hunts from Kansas City, to do an affordable housing project all in for under $125 a square foot. To stick build the same project would be close to 200.
Yeah.
Okay, you're up.
And then just to show kind of how hard building at kind of the current market rates are, this is also the national data from the National Low Income Housing Coalition on the amount of rent that these renters would be able to afford working, each kind of job type and wage level. So that $125 per square foot all-in mark is really kind of the target number to be able to build at a rate that you can rent to these demographics reasonably.
Go back to the last slide. This is the housing development I did that was the inspiration to it all. This is in Eagle County, Eagle, Colorado, the Bluffs, where we experimented with both stick-built and modular, single family and multifamily residences, which convinced me that there was a unique delta in going with the modular product, and that after it was installed, you couldn't tell the difference unless you were a professional. So this is where it all started for me. I took this concept to the public home builders in Southern California, KB Homes and Standard Pacific and Lennar, and they sponsored me to develop this process. And unfortunately, that was in 2008, and the crash happened. And before we could put a shovel in the ground on that factory, economic conditions changed. They became less interested in the production system. But Bruce Carr said to me in a meeting, one day people are going to start caring about the nationality of the people building our multifamily housing. And when that day happens, this will be the only way to build this stuff. I remembered what he said. And after our last president got elected, I said, okay, this is the time. Let's go to the next one.
And then, the reason why we turned to automation is it really gives you a higher control on the labor cost. So, I mean, the amount of workers that would usually take, for one of our examples is a factory in Pennsylvania. They have 250 employees to do the same production amount of 2,000 units annually that we're projecting, but we're doing it with 85 employees in the factory. So that's about a $9.5 million savings just on salaries and compensation. So that's basically like a 6 to 9 month kind of return for that investment on the automation equipment. And then it's also a lot more efficient for a lot of these slower kind of repetitive tasks like framing a wall, sheathing a wall, kind of drywalling. And you're within kind of a lower margin of error because the machines are, I guess, so much more better at doing repetitive tasks. And then because of that, I guess the way that we have to build to transport it to the sites, a lot of the product is a lot higher quality because it's got to survive kind of the transportation trip to the site. So they have to be built a lot more structurally sound than your regular kind of stick-built construction.
Next. Manufactured and modular have become dirty words in the industry, unfortunately. So we focus on the new monikers are volumetric or industrialized housing. And I really like the name industrialized housing because we are trying to use best manufacturing practices across all industries to make this a really efficient process. Okay.
Yeah.
So our major subcomponents are, it should be obvious, but it isn't necessarily obvious, are walls, floors, and ceilings. Those are the main components that go into to a module. So this is a example of a wall framing line, which we're going to show you video of how it works. The robotics that we use are really 2-axis robotics, primarily because we're working on a flat panel and we do not need a 6-axis robot because it's just overkill in most areas. These systems that, like the system you see in front of you, there are probably 6 manufacturers of this type of equipment in the entire world. There are only 2 in the United States. This particular company is in New Zealand, and there's one in Germany, one in Czech, and one in Sweden. So we get I know every single one of these, the principals of these companies personally. So we have an opportunity to pick the best of each manufacturer's deal to put together our line. And so the critical thing in this type of manufacturing is having what we call balanced lines. And that means the floors are ready at the same time the walls are ready and the ceilings are ready. So it can be assembled into one module without any lag time or choke points in the manufacturing process. The next one. This is a video. I'm going to talk over it and explain what's going on of one of the systems. This is a system of a company in Germany. And as you'll see, there's a ton of automation involved. So here we have an automated material handling where plate stock, top and bottom plate stock, is put in place and run through this machine, which is a saw and a router. And you can see there are little notches that came out in that plate stock. So when you build a wall, you have a top and bottom plate and studs in the middle. So that plate stock now goes into what we call an extruder. And that plate stock runs down a conveyor, and studs are put in by a robot. Here you can see they're being picked up and placed on a conveyor, so another robot can place them in the wall assembly, and the wall assembly advances on its own. So how this is figured out is we have a 3D CAD engine that also converts the 3D panel drawing into machine code that the robots understand to, so it goes down to the floor to a programmable logic controller, and the worker releases it for work. You just saw a gantry go over, and you're about to see another gantry go over putting in insulation, putting on sheathing, nailing, and routing the openings. So on this gantry, there's a multi-tool I don't remember, holder that puts the right tool doing the right task at any time. So now you've got a wall that's been sheathed on two sides, and all the electrical, mechanical, and plumbing is already in. So the wall is finished to be deployed on the floor deck. Now, you see this large maze of walls. The Europeans, what they've decided to do is they've decided to coat their walls and wait for the stuff to dry, the panels to dry before they do recoating. So we decided, we created a solution that we think is significantly better. This is our invention using existing technology in other industries. And what it is these are 40-foot by 12 walls. And each one of these boxes represents a process of taping joints, putting the first coat, drying, putting the first coat of mud on, drying, and putting the third coat of mud on, sanding, and then taking the panel, painting it with 2-axis robots. All of these functions are done by 2-axis robots as the panels index through our system. We get a wall, and then it goes through an infrared curing oven to dry the whole compound. And so once it's gone through the infrared curing oven, it is ready to be installed. So our system coats a panel with 3 coats of drywall mud, primer, and paint. A 40-foot by 12 section comes out every 11 minutes. Wow. So, a lot of people wouldn't think that the thing that slows down a lot of production is waiting for paint to dry, but that's the truth. That is the biggest hole in the production system, the way other people are doing it. And we figured we had to create a solution to make this work. And that's what we've done with our friends at Caldan Conveyor out of Denmark, and Carlisle Fluid Technology, which is supplying us with the painting robots and the curing ovens. And so we have 40-foot panels ready to go every 11 minutes in our process. And then it's picked up by a transport and to an overhead crane where it's lifted into place on a floor deck.
Yeah. And then I guess the process that we go through every time that we get any orders would be, we would schedule it into a production slot for the year. And then as we run through our process, making all the wall panels, making the floor, making the ceiling, and then assembling the boxes, the interior finishes would be done. All the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical would be in there as well. And then we store it, index it, and ship it to, I guess, each construction site, where it's then stacked and stitched together. And it's pretty cool, I guess, the system that we have in place to connect the different modules. All of the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical is really just kind of slid into place, and it locks together. And those are stronger than the actual pipes themselves. So that was another, I think, cool thing that we've been doing that speeds up the process, but also makes a lot better product than everyone else out there currently. And then from there, you do your exterior finish, which, you can do anything that's on site, or depending, we've been looking at a few other ones that we can possibly just do in the factory as well to save extra time.
These things are transported on flatbeds to the site. And what we do is we transport like 10 units at a time. And in one day, 10 units are plopped in place by a crane. Saves for all kinds of staging at the site. And we can deliver, we can be financially efficient delivering up to 450 miles from the site of our plant, which will be in Grand Junction. Just to bring you up to date, we are closing on a $25 million investment by a New York Wall Street firm, debt and equity firm, this week. And that'll give us 80% of the money we need to do the first plant. And so we're going to be going and blowing starting middle of next week. We're about to submit our plans for our building to the city of Grand Junction, and we're on our way.
Yeah. And then as far as transportation goes, in Colorado, we can do 16 feet wide
72.
by 72. But then once you cross state borders, I know Kansas, there's a 14-foot wide limit. And then across some other borders, there's a weight limit. That's a huge thing to consider as well. But the cost-wise so far is really not as large as we would expect them to be from quotes that we've seen from other companies so far. So that's $7 per loaded mile. I think for projects that we've underwritten down here to Denver, adds about $1.50, $2 square foot. So it's not something that'll break the budget as well. And then,
So we have a website up, mosaic-housing.com, and the interest is just blowing up the phone. We've landed a large institutional client wants us to put a factory in Texas, which we're about to do, start that process. And they're asking for 160 units per month. So, and we're probably one of 2 or 3 factories in the whole country that can do that kind of production. And we've also been asked by folks in Nevada to bring a plant there and JV with them on the development of 500 acres worth of land. So our test project is the one in Grand Junction. Our product is all green all the time. In deployed, it will qualify for LEED Platinum. And so we're doing both the manufacturing and the developing of communities for workforce housing, so we can control how the stock is deployed in the community. And I've been doing this for 20 years. So let's go to the next one.
Yeah, so the impact that we're gonna have is really giving developers and other builders kind of another option that's a lot more efficient than their current options to building and their traditional kind of stick build mentality. So they can really make a lot of these projects that usually wouldn't pencil, like building, workforce housing or affordable housing down to 60% AMI or lower, pencil a lot better than, building it kind of the way that they're used to. And
Part of the passion of this project for me is, why do only rich people get to live in greenhouses? And the technology is here. It should be deployed over the entire landscape or mosaic of our of the US community and the Colorado community. So everybody gets to have the best possible living experience. That's why we came up with the name Mosaic.
Yeah. And then for us, that is really a strong kind of statement too. So we continually just keep looking for better materials to put into the modules, since we can make them a lot cheaper. We have a lot more margin to experiment with these things. We can make a lot more sustainable modules, a lot more green modules. So some of them have been like using T-studs, for example, to frame that exterior walls, because they help block a lot more of the heat loss and heat transfer from the outside. So it's a lot of things like that that we're really passionate about being able to test and hopefully integrate, that usually wouldn't get a chance to come to market without a platform like us, because people just wouldn't be able to make it work and give them a chance. And then the automation process, there's also just so many other ways to, I guess, go about improving that, to improve the wellness and livelihood, not just the people that are using the modules, but also kind of the laborers in the factory. So you're kind of reducing the repetitive stress, and then they're doing a lot more skilled, work that's not as harmful to their psychological kind of well-being, physical well-being.
One of the things that is in Factory 3 or 3.0 or 4.0 is being disruptive in the supply chain issues by advanced 3D printing things that could be mass produced when a more efficient generation of 3D printers comes around. right now Siemens has got a 3D printer that 3D prints in metal. So they can make bathroom fixtures, kitchen fixtures, kitchen faucets and stuff like that out of the system, but it doesn't produce enough volume quick enough. But we think by disrupting the China supply chain with the potential of going in this direction, will make the process even more efficient. And so, I mean, the goal here is to keep affordable housing affordable and still have a high quality living experience. Any questions?
I may have missed it. Where's your guys' current factory right now?
This is our beta factory going in Grand Junction.
Okay.
Everybody except for Calvin has worked in this industry for 20, 25 years. So it's the best and the brightest from all across the manufactured industry that knows this is the way it's got to go. But there's been a lot of pushback. One of the interesting things is one of the largest players there are two large players in the manufacturing business. One is owned by Warren Buffett. Well, Warren Buffett also owns one of these companies that makes some of this automation. Doesn't use it in any of his factories. There's a culture issue in the existing modular manufacturing space that we don't feel tied to. And so we're kind of blowing it up. So.
Yeah, so when you all ask questions, if you don't mind, share your name and kind of how you're affiliated, either as a Burns student or outside of Burns. But I got a couple questions. So, this reminds me, Stuart, way back when there was a book written called The Machine That Changed the World. And it was about the lean manufacturing process and all of that. And, I listened to this and I think it's the same thing. It's the machine that changed the world, right? How we build houses, what's the philosophy behind building those houses and all of that. So it is, did you look at any of that philosophy and just the practice and process of lean? It sounds like it's all over this, whether it's intentional or not. It just sounds like it's all over it.
Totally intentional.
Yeah.
And totally intentional. So, one of the things that was important for me was to be able to reinvest labor savings in better materials and still be competitive. Like our floor system, we went with a floor system that's a little more expensive, but cuts the labor out by 25%. And so it's a better system. It's a web truss. But one of the things it does, it allows us to put the MEP in through the openings through the webs without having to modify the floor system at all. So, we figure we can run in a module, we can run all of the forced air ductwork, in our system in about 10 minutes. And so that labor savings is going in to pay for the more advanced flooring system and the highly advanced forced air system. The forced air system that we're using uses 2.5-inch mini duct, which is pressurized. And the pressure, it's more expensive. The pressurized, the Bernoulli theorem, Bernoulli is the same guy who gave us the information on why planes can fly. Well, one of his other projects was to understand the dynamics of compressed gases. And so this system compresses the gases, and once it's released at the register, it aspirates all over the space. So hot air doesn't rise and cold air doesn't sink. It's all aspirated over the space as it aspirates or explodes over the space. And that it makes it highly green and extremely efficient, but it costs more. But we believe, that is our mantra, to deliver a better unit through the reapplication of labor savings into better materials.
Wow. What was the name of that system again, or ductwork system?
There are two manufacturers in the United States. There are a few in Canada. The one that's closest to us is a company called Unico. It's in St. Louis. And there's one in Boston called Space Pack.
Again, if anybody else has a question, please jump in. I've got another one too. So I'm sure you get questions or pushback on the displaced labor workforce that you're talking about, that again, the savings in labor, but how much pushback do you see? Because the resistance is just that, well, what's going to happen with all these folks that have been displaced, your drywall hangers and finishers and all of that. But so I'm hearing kind of two sides of it. You're talking about reducing the stress of repetitive activities. And I know from my whole family's in construction. So it's kind of like they're worn out and used up by age 40. They're done. Many of them in some of these trades, they just can't do it anymore physically. So that is a real factor of retraining a workforce so that they can actually work for a lifetime. And so I'm hearing in your speaking, Stuart, that you've considered all of this, but I'm curious to hear what the case is for what you do with the displaced workforce.
Before I answer the question, I want to tell you an anecdote. I started talking to these automation integrators, and one of them said, you need to see this stuff in place. And they took me to the most advanced auto plant in the US in Toledo, Ohio. And there was a United Auto Worker guy in his little United Auto Worker jumpsuit. And what he did was he looked at a programmable logic controller, and he checked the instructions to make sure it was they were correct, and he pressed a button. And, I was blown away at that moment, knowing that an auto worker did not have to be, a heavy tool worker in this kind of environment. And that kind of shaped my thinking, like you're talking about, being taking high I don't want to say stress, but you understand the concept, jobs, and turning them into more, typical automation manufacturing, less stressful and less physically taxing. Have we got any pushback? And the answer is no, but I expect we will. So, once we start deploying the stuff this way, I'm sure we'll hear from our friends in unions. But I've actually engaged certain unions about our process, and they kind of get that this is the future of jobs. And if the unions want to be a carpenters union wants to be a part of this, they should get on board early. And I'm open to that, being the crazy Democrat that I am, but that, you know, we've done, so yeah, down the road, this may turn into a union shop. Personally, I feel like the destruction of unions has destroyed the apprenticeship programs in our country. So we don't really have skilled workers coming through the system like we did before. And that's also part of the problem.
Any other questions, folks? Because I've got a few more if you don't.
Yeah, I have a question. Hi, Chessie Brady. I'm a Daniels student, MBA student. I also work for RTD and focus on affordable housing. And I'm wondering why Grand Junction for this plant and where you see most of the market for the product in Colorado, or to what extent? How big is the market?
Well, Colorado's kind of a crazy state in where the markets are. Yes, up and down the Front Range, there's a ton of work, but lacking affordable land. So we do other things like subsidize our infrastructure with metro districts and things like that. But we also have these ski resorts that need places to put their employees. So all of a sudden, there's a huge rural market that does not exist all over the country. But all along the Front Range, in the ski towns, and traditionally manufactured housing has been something for rural markets that don't have general contractors or other resources. But that's not our market. Our market is resort cities and suburbs, and our clients, we expect, will be institutional that want to be in rental housing because it's the low-hanging fruit of investment grade real estate. And maybe they would say, okay, Stuart, we want 4 of these in 4 different places. Can your mass production system deliver to all of these places? And, my thinking is, why not? So already some of our customers, and we haven't built anything yet, are saying, we want you to follow us as we start developing all over the country. And so that makes me more on to something. What was the other part of your question, Chessie?
Just why Grand Junction?
Why? Our former great governor, John Hickenlooper, realized that the rest of the state was doing okay, but the oil patch was not. And so most of the opportunity zones, most of the empowerment zones, most of the subsidies that Colorado does not give a lot of subsidies for anything, but the ones that they do give are in communities that have been trying to adjust their economics after oil went to $20 a barrel.
Other questions?
I have a quick one. My name's Cole. I'm a MS Reby student at Burns. Who's your guys' biggest competitor? Is there anyone else doing something similar to you guys or on the same front?
Frankly, our big competitor, multifamily space. And, there's one general contractor that has 45% of the multifamily market in the state. So we got a bullseye painted on those guys. But, you know, we can do it cheaper and faster. So we think we can make a compelling argument, you know, a compelling argument in the marketplace.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Stuart and Kelvin. Thank you for being here today. My name is Francisco. I'm an adjunct faculty member here at the Bourne School, and I was a graduate of the program. So I actually had classes with Kelvin. It's great to see you. But Daniel asked the question: is how many people does assembly require? And I'm curious as well. How does this roll out once they're are they assembled in the factory? Does your company actually transport them and build them on the site?
We probably will rely on common carriers to deliver them, but we do both. We deliver them and sell to third-party developers, and we develop our own properties as well.
Okay, great.
Stuart, in that regard, follow up on Francisco's question. So one of the things I know with some other modular companies, one of the challenges they have is your typical GC and even your trade contractors, that they're not used to assembling. They're used to stick building from the ground up and all of that. So when they go to look for folks to put these things together, they're not necessarily always trained individuals in this process. They're traditional. What do you see there in terms of once it gets to the site? Are you training people in this process, or you're using your traditional carpenters and folks like that and contractors, and especially contractors, to actually assemble them?
So we held a focus group with contractors as we were designing our process. And one of the things they said to us is it would be a lot easier if there was only one engineer doing all of these, the product, because they would always make the connection system the same. So we wouldn't have to relearn something every time we did it. We might take a loss on the first job, but after that, it would work for us. And so, so we have, as a shareholder, a civil structural engineer that's been in the modular business for 40 years, out of California. He's been a 20-year friend in the industry, and he ran the Modular Institute board for 10 years. So that's our solution to the problem, but it is a problem. And that we recognize. But, you know, the other part of this thing is developers are no longer builders. They're financial guys, right? Or girls, financial people. And they don't know how stuff goes together, and they couldn't care less. So, you know, could we offer a complete package, including installation and stuff like that with captured subs? Yes, we can. We plan on doing it. And we think it'll help us in the warranty issues that usually come down where everybody, all the different trades are pointing at each other, if it was really limited to just a few trades.
That makes sense, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I also think about it in terms of training, you know, we're seeing more and more, there's a Colorado home building academy and things like that, where they're training high schoolers and maybe people who even dropped out of high school, the trades, the traditional trades. But I'm just wondering if there isn't a whole component of education that looks at, again, high school or vocational training that actually focuses on manufacturing process and assemblage process, say from a lean perspective and all of that, that could really benefit a future workforce in the field of construction, quite frankly.
Yeah, and okay, so The only two places I know there are those programs exist are at Penn State and Virginia Tech. And they're really good. We're trying to bring that type of program. You know, one of the things about the subsidy we have with the state of Colorado is that we have to engage a local learning institution, which out there is Mesa State or Mesa, whatever you want to call it, Mesa College, whatever. And they actually have both a 2-year school and a 4-year school. So creating trade programs and certificates for that particular place is going to be kind of a experimental thing that we're doing. And actually we're supported by a lot of the technology suppliers that really want us to do this. So they don't get a basic education in AutoCAD, they get an education in something like our 3D platform that also creates machine code that drives the machines.
Wow. So this has been fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So we've just got a few more minutes, everyone. If any of you still have a question that you'd like to ask, please go ahead and do that.
This is Trevor Tierney, grad student in the REBI program. Thank you both for presenting today. It's a very inspiring project you're working on. Calvin, maybe this question is for you since you're an alumnus of, just curious of, you know, for those of us trying to start a new career in this industry, what are some ways for us to kind of approach our learning or kind of our career path so that we could work in a setting like this one day? Or what are some ways we can prepare maybe new roles that might be out there for us?
Yeah, I think personally, it's really about keeping an open mind. So a lot of the education that we get, like in, I don't know if you've taken it yet, like in Jeff's class, a lot of his financial analysis, that's tailored for real estate, but it's also pretty general. Like you can apply that in a lot of different ways. So a lot of those classes, you know, it's tailored for real estate, but it's also open enough to where you get enough information where you can cross-pollinate with a lot of the information. And then the other thing is just getting yourself kind of out there, exposed, talking to people. Because before this, I was with a few other startups, one doing energy generation distribution, which was entirely new. That was nothing that we touched on in the real estate program. There was, I guess, a solar company, a weather kind of roof weather station company. And then I met Stuart through one of the partners in one of those startups. So we've been talking ever since.
Yeah, and the other thing, we're working with a skeleton crew right now until we get fully funded, but there will be opportunities with us in our Denver office because we're going to centralize a lot of the management issues, procurement, budgeting, development. So don't be afraid to call Calvin and say, I might have some interest down the road after I graduate. And, we can teach you our way. I mean, I think Calvin will be the first one to admit that he's learned a lot since he's been here. So, we want to offer this opportunity, this is a perfect opportunity to offer this opportunity if anybody has any interest in what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's not every day you get to learn from, I guess, Stuart, who was an attorney and a developer in his background. I think he ran a few banks as well. Our CFO has a ton of experience everywhere. So there's just a ton of knowledge and experience to learn from. So it's been a really interesting time.
So very good. Any last questions, burning questions for anyone otherwise? Any questions up there? Well, thanks to all of you who joined us. I really appreciate you coming on in. And like I said, I think you can hear, you know, part of our goal in this series for the future of real estate is innovation. And I think you can hear it in the speaking that we heard today from Stuart and from Kelvin and their whole process. But, you know, I think what I'm most impressed with, Stuart, is the number of years and the investment you've put into it from the standpoint of your own research and seeking out better ways to do this business. And, you know, the tagline for the Bourne School is building a better way in all aspects of the built environment. And you definitely have demonstrated that. And we really appreciate your time. And Kelvin, I'm so glad you've landed where you feel like a fit. And I know that was a bit of a challenge, but it sounds like you found it. I'm so happy for you. And with that, let me just remind everyone that in April, we're going to have another guest for our Future of Real Estate series. Be watching for that announcement. We'll probably have it scheduled here fairly soon, and be watching for that. But other than that, any final words from you, Stuart?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is you're only on this planet a short time. Think about your personal goals and try to work them into being part of a solution as opposed to just your economic gratification. That's what Calvin and I are doing. We think this is a desperate need in our country. And so I would leave you with the thought of, as you consider your careers, to try and be a part of the solution.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Kelvin, any final words?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you everyone for coming and hearing and listening to us. It's been, I guess, a roller coaster process, but we're finally getting to the finish line. So I'm excited to bring this out and you know, provide a solution for a lot of people in the industry and a lot of people, yeah, in general.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing it all with us, Kelvin, and stay in touch, please. And we'll be in touch as well.
Yeah,
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you, gentlemen.